Welcome back, everyone, to the Fantasy Network. I am your host, of course, Jimmy Nuts, and this is your favorite time of the year. You get to spend quite some time, I would imagine this is going to take, with the Friday Night Delight himself. That's me. And we're doing the Nuttys, which is the award show for everything that I read in this wonderful year. Going to be talking about a lot of different books. The categories are 7. There are 7 of them tonight. And each category is going to have, well, about 4 nominees. Some of them, it was hard to get to 4. Some of them, I had to make a lot of brutal cuts. But anyone, besides one category, if you're included, should definitely feel great. I know a lot of big name authors, George R. R. Martin, there's so many people. Tab Williams, huge fans of me and the channel, and I know that this is a big moment for a lot of people because it's not just another award show on BookTube. It's the Nuttys, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, the Nuttys. All joking aside, though, anything that's mentioned tonight, I just want to say, has been fantastic to read, minus one category, like I said. And this is the first time ever. We've been doing this for a long time, 5 years now. As of next month, I think it's 5 years that I've been here on BookTube. This is the first time that we have ever done the Nuttys live. We have never done an award show live. And as people could probably notice, this is kind of my thing now. I do everything as a live stream. So you will see a lot of award shows on BookTube, but I don't know if any will be this good, this live, where anything can happen and most likely will happen. I want to greet everyone in the chat. Thanks for spending your Friday night. Or if you're watching after the facts, also, thank you for tuning in. I appreciate it. We already have super chats rolling in. Bees with super chat for $9.99 says, reporting live from the Nuttys red carpet. My God, is that Himothy? In fact, it is. And Bees, thank you for the super chat. It's very generous of you. People have been waiting a long time for this. I wasn't sure if I was going to do it in January, but honestly, I'm not going to finish another book for the rest of the year. So even though we have a few days left, we were safe to go ahead and announce some amazing winners, which we will get to briefly. Now, if you're watching this and you're like, Jimmy, I hate live streams. Why are all your videos so long? Don't worry. There will be timestamps in the description after I go off of this being live, and you can skip to the awards only, and you can just do it that way and miss all the preamble and the chat and really all the fun parts. But if you just want to get the meat and potatoes, you're going to have the bookmarks down below, which is going to be great. And also, before we continue on, I just want to say, I would love for you to fill out in the comments below, in the chat, whatever, as I do these, or at the end, if you're commenting, I want to hear your winners for these categories. I picked a couple categories. None of them are super original, I would say, but they're definitely ones that I thought would be interesting. I would love to have kept a lot of the categories from previous years, but things have changed. I'm reading a lot of different stuff now. For instance, there will be no character of the year this year. I went to the list and I said, can I make every single character of the year be from David Mitchell? Because that wouldn't be very fair. But truly, it would just be 4 David Mitchell characters with Timothy Cavendish winning. So I guess if you needed a character of the year, you would give it to Timothy Cavendish at this point. Mitch with a super chat, $13.99. Thank you so much. Says, enjoy a medium coffee. Exchange rate is killing me here. Mitch, I will definitely enjoy that medium coffee, and I genuinely appreciate the support. It really does mean a lot. I would say being a live only channel for right now, we are growing in different ways, but not always the ways that attract the most viewers. But that's, in my opinion, quite all right. I like where we're at. I like what we're doing. StoryTube says, let's go nuts or nutties. And StoryTube actually had the Tubies just about an hour ago. They did a premiere. Their videos up on their channel. It's like an hour and a half. Genuinely one of the most fun times I've had on BookTube in a very long time is checking out their videos. So once you're done with the Nutties, I would actually implore you to go check out StoryTube. They've been featured on this channel quite a bit, and that's because they're wonderful people, and they had an amazing community-driven award show that I thought was really special, and honestly just downright fun. It was just a ton of fun, and they put a lot of work into it, so you should go and support them with some really hilarious ads that they shot. In there. Molly says, got my discounted Christmas chocolate ready. Let the Nutties begin. We're going to be getting to the awards here soon. I just want to say hello to everyone in the chat. There is a ton of you, to be honest. It is a little overwhelming. As we're skipping down through here, I just wanted to say tonight is all about books that I, besides one category, loved. So for me, I just want you to know that I'm excited about these books. You might not agree on every award. You might not even like the books that I pick, but just know I'm not trying to validate or make any objective claims. This is simply just me and what I loved reading this year. And This year was hard, very, very hard, because I've been reading so much fantasy for so long. I've gotten a lot of the heavy stuff out of the way, a lot of the stuff that is tremendous, right? Like the who's who of the fantasy genre. Still some to go, but a lot of them are out of the way. As I dive into more genres, literary fiction, even thriller, all these other genres, I'm reading the best of those. So I'm very, very excited about those. But fantasy is becoming more of a trial and error process, which has led to me finding some really cool reads that maybe a ton of other people haven't read, but also it has led to some disappointments. It's also led to some books getting the DNF hammer, as my friend RJ would say. And that's cool. I think discovering and being open to new experiences is what makes us grow as readers. And I think it's an inevitability for myself to read widely. And I think that will probably be reflected in my awards today and most likely throughout the entire year of 2025 as we get going. Library Liar stops and says, Jimmy must be fending off the paparazzi as he tries to get into his own show. I mean, it is hard. Good thing I learned how to swim through these crowds. Kevin Jenkins says, rejoice, folks. Robin Hobb cannot win a Nutty this year. Raw. This is true. This is, I think, the first year where George R. R. Martin, Robin Hobb, and Steven Erikson will not be featured, which is a new era, right? Like I said, we're trying new things. Gavin reads it all, says, you have boycotted BookTube if Nutties didn't happen this year. You would have. Well, Gavin, I'm glad to say that you do not have to boycott, and I hope that you had a wonderful Christmas, my friend. It's really great to see you. It's great to see everybody here. I see a lot of former Chatting with Nuts guests, which is pretty excellent. And Christina says, I think Jimmy is now the first official book live streamer. I don't know if I am, but I do intend to be the very best as much as I can. And everybody, I want you to say hello to Mrs. Nuts. She's in the chat tonight moderating. Just give it up to Mrs. Nuts, because these videos take a lot of work. Any booktuber that does this kind of thing knows. And doing it live was actually a lot more work than I had anticipated. I was being optimistic for once in my life, and it was a bit of a crunch. But without Mrs. Nuts, this wouldn't have happened. A lot of the work that you're seeing here between the thumbnail and a lot of the templates and ideas actually came from Mrs. Nuts. And without her, this thing doesn't work. And she has done a tremendous job of helping me out and making sure that I'm not going too crazy during what has been, honestly, a pretty stressful last 2 or 3 months for me personally. So always love Mrs. Nuts and give it up for her in the chat. We are going to get started here very soon after I acknowledge this wonderful super chat from my boy David. He says, happy holidays, Jimmy. You got my Nutty for best fantasy network I found in 2024. Hoping I will be thanking you for the rec after I start rolling the Ellings in 25. And if you don't, you can blame all the other booktubers like Robin Hobb and pretend I never said it. But genuinely, thank you for the 5 spot. It's very, 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 very kind. Justin says, first Nutties and hopefully not my last. Hey, who knows? This ship, sometimes I wonder if I'm closer to the beginning of this channel or the end of this channel. I really don't know. 5 years, long time. Very, very long time. Mrs. Nuts is the GOAT, and so is the community that I have around me, and it is definitely one of the things that I cherish the most about this. And I'm sure I'll have a send-off message for everybody at some point. I may do a channel update at the end of this stream, by the way. Or I might just do a separate channel update. Maybe I'll do my In a Nutshell stream next week, because there are going to be a couple little changes that I think are all really, really good. But, you know, just a general kind of like what's going on. Surprising nobody, actually. The way YouTube works, when you go to someone's page, their video show first, then the live is in its own tab. So I've actually had a lot of comments recently, been commenting on old videos saying, hey, man, why don't you upload anymore? You haven't made a video in like 3 months. I'm like, no. I've made actually a lot more videos. I've just been doing them live. And yes, they are ungodly long, but they're all bookmarked or time-stamped. So they're actually easy to get through. And in many ways, these live streams are actually a way for me to do book reviews that people miss. Because I don't know if anyone's noticed, but I do book reviews essentially in a live format off the top of the dome most of the time. So I'm really just doing unedited book reviews, which I am trying to always get better and better at. Evie with the 10 spot says, there is no fantasy network without Mrs. Nuts. Love to Mr. and Mrs. Nuts. Evie, thank you. And thank you for the special edition book that you ordered for me. That was very kind of you. I got it today and I was very, very excited. So absolutely fantastic. Dutch Divine says, Jimmy, you are a legend. Trying to become one. Should we get started? Well, I would, but I just got 690 from Kev Jenkins with absolutely no message. I assumed there was supposed to be one there and he hit the submit button, or maybe he just wanted me to say 6-9 on the channel. Kev, you didn't have to do that, my friend. I appreciate it. And thank you for carrying me through all those Call of Duty lobbies. Story 2 with the 10 spot says, this is almost exclusively for Mrs. Nuts. We love you, Jimbo. A 420 super chat from Kev Jenkins, covering all the bases of the memes. I love it, Kev. Thank you very much. With that, we are going to get started. We're going to go to our very first award, a 1 of 7 tonight. And by the way, I know some people voted on, hey, Jimmy, we want to see you make a top 10 list. I don't know if I want to do top 10, but I may tier rank everything I read this year. That might be a stream that we do in like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, possibly. It will not be the next, because next Friday we do have December in a Nutshell, where I do the Patreon pick and everything. So make sure that you're there for that. But I am kicking around the idea of doing a tier ranking. I've also thought about doing a tier ranking of everything I've ever read, but that's like, we might be here for 8 hours. So we'll talk more about that at the end of the stream. The first award, it's time, is going to be new authors to me for the year of 2024. And this was one of the hardest categories for me to cut down to 4. There's so many people that I could have put on this list. What I kind of decided to do here is I'm picking authors who have other books, preferably books even outside of the series that they're writing in, that I can read, that I'm fired up for. Or if they've only written in a series, then I'm fired up to read a series. There were probably 10 authors that made this list with me, with me going into this year, reading a lot of new stuff. There was an opportunity to find a lot of new authors, and I did. It was successful. I mean, there's so many talented people out there. And for me to continue to find new authors to connect with and to kind of read into their soul for a little bit is one of the magics of reading and of this channel. So the nominees for this will be Marlon James. Now, this is Moon Witch and Spider King. I forgot to replace that with Black Leopard, Red Wolf. That's actually what I've read from him, but I'm very interested in his other work as well, which is the Seven Killings, I believe. It's the Bob Marley book. But then we also have William Gibson, and I read Neuromancer by him and absolutely loved it. And then we also have The Many-Colored Land by Julian May, a titan in the science fiction and fantasy genre that has been, unfortunately, a bit forgotten, but very prolific in her time writing in this genre. And then we have Tana French, who is someone I had no idea that I'd be reading, and she wrote, the book I read from her was The Searcher, which is a part of her new series, but she also has a Dublin crime series that is very famous, and Tana French is very renowned. These are all fantastic authors. There could have been many more on here. I thought 4 was a good number to go with, but there can only be one. There can only be one Highlander, and there can only be one winner for new author to me of the year of 2024. And that winner is, maybe shockingly to some, Tana French, and for her work on The Searcher. This is definitely, thank you, audience. Thank you. That applause track is too long. Tana French is someone who I think is just a fantastic writer that happens to be writing into this like crime mystery genre. I think Tana French could succeed in literally anything that she decided to do. Tana French really captured the spirit of Ireland, of at least what I got to experience when I was there for about a week, but also talking to people from Ireland. They say Tana French is authentic and thought out and real. And I think that those things go a very long way whenever you're writing about a place that people maybe have not been, to get that kind of authentic experience. But I thought Tana French was just really great at capturing little small moments. Not the most crazy plotting of all time. I've actually heard that her original series, the Dublin crime series, whatever it's called, is better. I've actually heard that's her best work. But if that's the case, then I am in for a treat, because I thought The Searcher was just fantastic. And there was something about Tana French's writing that really resonated with me. And I've been talking about this book a lot offline, actually. A lot of people who don't read, I've actually recommended this book too, and saying that you should go capture it, because the small town intricacies of simplicity are captured very well. So I think she's just brilliantly talented. She is critically acclaimed as well. And Tana French is, one of these breakout authors for me, not writing in the genre that I generally frequent. And that's really cool, because that gets to expand my horizons. So congratulations, Tana French. Definitely the most prestigious award she's ever won, right? Amanda says, Jimmy too enamored with Ireland to choose anyone else. That might be true. StoryTube says, you're welcome. They did tell me to buy this book. I really do appreciate it, and I look forward to reading the sequel in this series. I think that this is going to be really great. Anitha asks, is this a sad book? I am known for, sad, depressing books. I would say no. I mean, obviously it's a murder, disappearance / mystery kind of thing, but I think that there's actually a lot of feel-good moments in The Searcher. And Tana French is able to do a pretty good array of emotions. I think I even maybe chuckled in this book, and I never laugh whenever I read books, like literally ever. So I would give my hats off to her for having that range of emotions. So highly recommended. Tana French, The Searcher, or anything by her. I will be reading more of her, and I'm sure her books will continue to pop up as I do these lists, hopefully more in the future. So I don't think anyone expected Tana French to win that, if I'm being honest with you. I think, especially gauging off the live chat, a lot of people thought it was going to be Marlon James. It was close. It was very close. And Julian May as well. I mean, like I said, there are tons and tons and tons of people who could have made this list because I read so many new things. So pretty great. Pretty great. Tanner was voting for Marlon James to get most of these people to read the book and bounce off of it. Yeah. Unfortunately, there's a lot of books on my list that people will bounce off of, but that's okay. As long as they give it a shot, a fair shot, I think that would be really, really great. Molly says, Gibson shaking and crying that he didn't win the Nutty. I would agree with that. And Dutch Divine says, what would you rate the cover art for The Searcher? I would give it like a solid 6, I think. At least it's consistent, I guess, is the best way to put it. So with this, we now bounce into the series of the year. And last year was series that I finished, but as anyone who watches this channel knows, I don't finish series almost ever. Especially this year, as the Patreon wheel was brutal to me, had me reading tons of book 1s. I think in one case, there was actually even a book 2 in that. But there was definitely a lot of series started, not a ton finished. So I said, well, let's go with like best series. And the idea with this is I was trying to pick ones that are either ones I've read a couple books in, maybe 2 this year, or I'm a little bit further on in, or ones that I know that I'm going to continue for sure. And this one was not that hard to pin down for 4 candidates, and I would love to show you them right now. The series nominees are The Last King of Ostenard, which was concluded with The Navigator's Children by Tad Williams. Obviously, one that I was very, very excited about and talked about a lot on the channel this year. And then we have Brandon Sanderson's Wind and Truth, Book 5 in the Stormlight Archive, finishing out the very first arc. Very polarizing online, it seems, though I was pretty positive on it. The Citadel of the Autarch by Gene Wolfe. This is really just Book of the New Sun. So we can say, Last King of Ostenard, Stormlight Archive, Book of the New Sun. I put Citadel of the Autarch because it's probably my favorite of the books of those first 4. And then The Sarantine Mosaic by Guy Gavriel Kay. Guy Gavriel Kay, I think, has been nominated every year that I've had this channel. I'm pretty sure. So he has just done such a wonderful job of, being outstanding. Excellency is almost his status quo, which is very, very impressive. And I think sometimes I actually even underrate him a little bit. But all of these have been very enjoyable to read. Some of them have had ups and downs with me, but there was only one they left me with a sense of fulfillment and a sense of wonder and knowing that I was seeing something that I felt was truly special, though all of these are special in their own way. And that is The Navigator's Children by Tad Williams, which is The Last King of Ostenard by Tad Williams. This sequel series to Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, I thought that this was an amazing conclusion. It actually had a little bit of an ode to Return of the King by J.R.R. Tolkien, while also feeling a little bit more sped up, a little bit more modern than Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, which obviously was the big bridge from classic to modern fantasy. But yeah, I finished this series, and it felt like I had really been on a journey. And I thought that was very remarkable from a guy who's been writing for decades, and a series that has spanned 4 decades, I think, with Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, Ostenard, Last King of Ostenard being the sequel series. And I just think that he took some pretty big shots. He paid off things that he set up all the way back in Dragonbone Chair. You could tell he had a vision and he wanted to stick to it. And I don't think we're going to see many more books, one from Tad. I mean, supposedly he's working on some spinoffs, but the way Tad writes in a very methodical, patient, thoughtful way in the epic fantasy, I don't think will be seen much more. That's not to say that there's not epic fantasy or it's dying, but Tad Williams does epic fantasy in a very certain way. of which we don't really see written anymore. A lot of the epic fantasy we see now is a whole lot of pages and a whole lot of action, and that's very cool. But Tad Williams is willing to set up things that are very interpersonal and take his time and set scenes, and I think that he's just fantastic. So for me personally, Tad Williams is one of the best ever to do it. I thought that this was his best book that I have read, which is saying a lot because I've really loved a lot of Tad Williams books. And for it to cap off The Last King of Osnar made it the best series that I read in 2024. And I'm sad it's over. I'm genuinely, I was in a bit of a book hangover, even though I've enjoyed stuff since. But I just don't know how many more stories like this, written like this, we're going to see, especially from Tad, who is just an absolute legend and a class act and a good friend of the channel as well. So shouts out to Tad Williams. It's a shame that we couldn't get Waylon for the cover, but everything that's inside of this very mediocre cover is an absolute slammer. And honestly, this one wasn't close. This is best series of the year by a good margin for me. The other nominees were good, enjoyable, obviously, but not quite as epic or meaningful to me as The Last King of Ostenard. And this is your final warning. You guys need to pick up the series, okay? You guys need to read the sequels. They're fantastic. And Tad Williams, yes, his books are large, but you have to remember Tad Williams is actually still writing recaps for each book. So when you get into book 3 of The Last King of Ostenard, he has a recap not just for what's happened before, but for each individual book up until. The guy loves you readers. He wants to make it easy on you, and he always invites you to come back in, take a break, and jump back. So I got to tell you, easy one for best series of the year. Not difficult at all. But now we're going away from series, right? Big chunkers like Tad Williams' book. And we're moving into what I am calling the Shortie Award, which is Shortie of the Year. This is about anything like maybe 200 pages or less. I've really been trying to get more towards this. Even in my Discord, I actually recently asked for people to recommend me literary fiction that's 200 pages or shorter, and I was like very hard on the 200 pages. I'm like 200 pages or less, because if you give any room, everyone always, 300, 400 pages, but it reads fast. No. Keeping it short. We're keeping it short here. And the thing that I was looking for this award was short, but pointed and impactful. And also, if at all possible, entertaining, thought-provoking. Maybe it only takes me a few hours to read, but stays with me for days. That's probably the best way of describing the Shortie of the Year award. And the first nominee is Claire Keegan's Foster, which is a short story. It's free on Audible in the United States. This is another Irish author. This is one that's very, very critically acclaimed, but it's also one that, for how short it is, I was kind of surprised for how much longer I thought about it, which made it obvious that this would be on the list. But it's also the most recent book I think I've read in all the nominees in these awards. And then we have Lee Brackett's The Long Tomorrow. Lee Brackett, famous, as accomplished as a writer in the genre as you can be, also in television. The Long Tomorrow is a post-apocalyptic journey of two boys leaving somewhat of an Amish community in a post-apocalyptic world to find out that technology isn't all dead and it's certainly not all evil. And kind of a feel-good book, even though it's pretty dark at times as well. Very interesting book that I actually had a lot of love for. And then we have Nnedi Okorafor's Remote Control, which is a novella in a larger series, but this takes place in Africa. And it is short, very grim, and heartbreaking. Very heartbreaking. Post-apocalyptic Afrofuturism, I think, is the genre, the subgenre that it's labeled into. And Nnedi Okorafor is actually one of the authors that George R. R. Martin is super, super high on, and was supposedly working on a TV show for her main series that she had written. I think this is involved in. So this is one that I really wanted to check out, and I know that George spoke very, very highly of Okorafor. And hey, I would definitely recommend it. Yeah, I thought it was really good. And then we have A Pale View of Hills by Kazuo Ishiguro. This is his debut novel, and many people say that this is one of his weaker novels. But for me, I thought I was kind of entranced by it. I loved it and was very impressed by the psychological nature of the story. So all of these very short books, you could probably read them in a day or two, but these are also ones that are going to hopefully give you something to think about and something to ponder over that will stick with you and you can have great discussions about. But there was a clear winner for this one. Really, really tough between two of them. But there was a clear clear winner, and that was A Pale View of Hills. I can't speak tonight, by Kazuo Ishiguro. I actually just saw someone in chat say they've only read one Ishiguro and was bored, should have DNF'd. I totally expected to kind of hear that. That was Eerie Fairy Tales, which, by the way, hello, welcome. And that's cool. It's totally cool. This is one that I'm going to have to put the asterisk next to and say, you may find this book aimless and boring, but for me personally, I thought that this was tremendous. It's about motherhood. It's about post-World War II Japan and the effects that had on society there and the people. And it grabbed me pretty much more than any of the other short reads that I had this year. This was a clear winner. The two I had to decide between was The Long Tomorrow by Lee Brackett. I really loved that book. I had a lot of good times with it, especially because it's post-apocalyptic. And I felt like A Pale View of Hills just outdid it for the fact that I wasn't sure if the story was better after everything that came before was better or completely unreliable. And I thought that was really cool. I think it's a really good use of perspective. And Ishiguro is just, I don't know. For me, it's kind of remarkable how accomplished he is. And I think how little I hear about him. I had never heard about him until maybe last year. And there's literary circles that talk about him, but he is not the most popular person, at least in the United States. I've heard that he sells much better in the UK. But for a debut novel and for the things that it covers and that unreliable narrator, it just, it had the punch that I needed from this. And Ishiguro has become arguably my second favorite author of all time, probably from the 3 or 4 books I think that I've read from him. So I was thrilled that his debut, which is considered one of his weakest novels, to be such a slammer with me. And I hope that you'll give it a try, knowing that it might be boring to you. That is totally possible. It would not actually be all that uncommon. Even Ishiguro nuts don't love this one as much as me, I don't think. Chadia has read it and liked it. And Matt Keen said, I love a good aimless novel. Eerie Fairy Tale says, I'm up to trying more. Often it's the timing. Yeah, timing is everything, for sure. And I never really indict anybody that hates a book that I love, or dislikes or DNFs or whatever, because we all come to books at different times with different tastes and different wants and needs and all that good stuff. This book hit me right at the right time. And maybe Ishiguro has hit me at the right time as an author, possibly. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. The motherhood in this book is striking, very, very striking. And also almost like tales within generations of a country. Very, very strong. And had me thinking a whole bunch. So Tanner says, damn, Ishiguro butting in on David Mitchell's stuff. I mean, Mitchell and Ishiguro and Barbara Kingsolver have all catapulted very high in the top authors list. Molly says, Ishiguro is 0 for 2 for me. In theory, I should like him, but in practice, I just don't. I think that's fair. For me, I'm always kind of amazed by how plain his language is, but how much he is saying underneath. I specifically felt this way about Clara in the Sun, for sure. So hopefully more people will check it out, and we will see if other people feel like it should ever win an award. Maybe not. Maybe so. Belltube says, I haven't read it, but I loved it. I like that. I like that logic, Belltube. If I said it, it should definitely be fact. Right? Right? Okay, we're moving on to the surprise of the year. The best surprise of the year. Surprise, whatever. Woo my. Lots of surprises this year. And we already see a repeat here of Lee Brackett. Obviously, this little short book had a lot of impact on me, but can it win Surprise of the Year? We'll have to see. So Lee Brackett's The Long Tomorrow is a nominee. The Last Murder at the End of the World by Stuart Turton. This was someone I had no idea existed. I thought the cover looked cool, and it sounded like a murder mystery at an apocalyptic setting, which apocalyptic settings was kind of a thing for me. And I wanted to dive into more because I love it. And this just called to me. And I was with a friend. We were at an amazing bookstore. And I said, you know what? I think I'm just going to snag it. And I did. And I read it. And I had a great time with it. I don't think it's the greatest book of all time. But this category is not about being the best book ever. It's not about being best in class, best in genre. What it's about is exceeding expectations or coming out of nowhere, right? Like just being something that you had no idea this experience is waiting for you. And I think that specifically with The Last Murder at the End of the World, I found an author who is, for me, is going to be someone I have to read more of. And I've also, again, heard this is actually his weakest novel. So I would love to see this or see more from him for sure. And then I have Ohio by Stephen Markley. This book was one that I had recommended to me by a literary booktuber, and then I kind of passed it on to one of my patrons and friend who lives in Ohio. I said, hey, he kind of grew up in the same area as I did. It's like, you should check this out. I think that this would probably be really good. He read it, loved it, evangelized about it. I've evangelized about it. I had my wife read it. I had my best friend read it. And almost unanimously, someone had something, like they all had something to say about this book. Even if it wasn't their favorite book, it was a book that left an impression on them and really did speak to a lot of the unfortunate truths of small town Appalachia. And yes, I call it Appalachia. Sue me. This book was very heavy, very, 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 very heavy. I would advise caution if you're not into very grim things, because unfortunately there's a lot of tragedies that happen in towns like that, the one featured there. Obviously, I already talked about The Long Tomorrow by Lee Brackett, the post-apocalyptic with two boys going off. Technology is not the devil. And then we have Severed Echoes by Anya Dillon. Anya Dillon is a friend of mine, friend of the channel, probably is here even in chat. And I just want to say, as I said when I covered this book, I am always honest when it comes to people I know when they write things. I've had friends that have written things that I've had to go to them and say, hey, wasn't quite for me. Wasn't sure what to expect from Amanda's book, Anya Dillon's book. I knew it would be competently written. However, even Anya Dillon said, hey, this really might not be for you. But what I found in Severed Echoes was a cosmic horror, romance, thriller, weird book. Very weird. I heard someone actually kind of relate it to Clive Barker, and I thought that that was pretty apt. And I thought that this book caught me by surprise, not because I was surprised that Anya Dillon could write a good book, but I was surprised that I just happened to have so much fun with it. I read this very quickly. I kind of just burned through it. And that's the case for all four of these books. Every single one of these books was a pleasure to read, and it was books that I could not put down, maybe because I was so shocked that I loved them, but there can only be one winner, and this one was tight. I changed the winner multiple times, and there was actually other nominees that had fit in the top four. So this is the one I went back and fixed the most. But if I was ignoring everything that I'd be afraid people would say, I was like, I just have to go with my gut and my heart. And my heart says that the surprise of the year is Severed Echoes by Anya Dillon, winning the Nutty. And that is genuinely because I think for all intents and purposes, when you write down a lot of the things that are in this book, it should not work, but it works so well and gets better as it goes. And so many books I read nowadays have such a strong hook and such a strong beginning and rising action. And then by the climax, I'm burnt out of it. I'm ready to go. I just read a book recently. I was really enjoying the first 50% of it. And by the end of it, I was so ready to say goodbye. But with Severed Echoes, my only complaint was that I actually felt like the end came a little too quick. There could have actually been more to this book. I think that in the right hands, I think this is a self-published book. I think that in the right hands, developmental editor, it could be shined up. I don't want to say fixed up because there's not a lot broken with it, but there could be more put into it. And I actually could see this going places. And I've kind of shared that with Anya Dillon as well. But I genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, had a great time with this. I was not sure what to expect, especially when the author tells you, hey, this book's probably not going to be for you. Like, I didn't write it with you in mind. And then you read it and have a good time is a pretty special thing. And just happens to also be a friend. So if that invalidates this award for you and you're watching, that's fine. But I can only be honest, which is all I know. And I would not ever want to put my integrity at risk. Again, not saying that you'll love it, but I did. And I am anxiously waiting book 2 because there will be more. There will be more. So I think that one might be a surprise for some folks. But if you guys watched the wrap up when I covered this book, I was very high on it. Very, very high on it. And I stand by that. It's only grown more fond in my memory as I've moved on from it. And this one was a razor close for surprise of the year because there's a lot of really good stuff this year. A lot of good recommendations from the patron wheel, a lot of good recommendations from my Discord and comments on videos. And, I'm always willing to try anything. And because of that, I end up finding a lot of new favorite reads, which is really freaking cool. Aslan said, what is a good Ishiguro book to start with him? I honestly would recommend either Claire and the Sun or Pale View of Hills. Pale View of Hills if you're not afraid of a little bit of an aimless plot. If you're okay with light on plot, I think one, kind of a requirement for Ishiguro, but I think that would probably be a good place. I know a lot of people say Never Let Me Go, but that's actually my least favorite from him. I still liked it a lot, but it is my least favorite Ishiguro, I think. Samwise says, if you're reading more short fiction, Jimmy, I'd love to hear your thoughts on Flannery O'Connor, and considered by some to be one of the best short story author ever, and definitely the source of some of my best reads. Yeah, so I'm going to be reading more Chekhov, and I'm going to read more Flannery O'Connor. I have, oh crap, what is the book I got? I don't know. I have one of her books, and I've been very, very excited to read it. And Anith is also saying there's a buddy read for Never Let Me Go in January, and Alan, the library from Alexandria's Discord. Everyone come on and over and read with them. So if you're wanting to get into Ishiguro and you want some people to experience with, there you go. There you go. Lauren Elizabeth, welcome. Said Clara is still the only book I've read by this author, so I should keep reading. Yeah, I really did like Clara, but that one was a bit polarizing among his fans and people who aren't his fans. But I actually got a lot out of that book for the subtle world building. I've actually considered doing a video or a live talking about how I think that Ishiguro does a lot of things that more science fiction and fantasy authors should do in their world building. And he does it in a ridiculous amount of short words. And people only wish they could set the tone that he does. But I digress. Maybe one day I will do that. Rogue said, after watching the Tubies, I'm starting to see repeats. Well, we are friends and we do read a lot of the same stuff. So Turton. People were choosing Turton to win Surprise of the Year. Interesting. Gavin said, I like 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. That's probably the one that I'll be reading next, and then I'll be reading his other one about a lake or something like that. Joseph Reed's book says, I'm just happy that a book I recommended to Jimmy, The Long Tomorrow, was a finalist twice for the Nuttys. Yes, and thank you. You did. You DM'd me, actually, and you were the reason why I did it. I took a risk because the cover was terrible, but I was like, hey, maybe it'll be good, and it was, and it paid off, which is pretty amazing. Mrs. Nuts chiming in, saying that she loved Ohio by Stephen Markley. I really want to read The Deluge, which is supposed to be like a post-apocalyptic climate novel, and I've heard it is very complex and very difficult to read. Your pronunciation is the correct one, Jimmy. Did I pronounce something wrong? I mean, hey, you know, it's me. A Pale View, you're welcome. One of my faves. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, library is correct. Also on the Tubies, spoiler alert, but Anya Dillon did win the science fiction book of the year over there as well, and is actually getting a trophy. I do not have a trophy to give anyone, unfortunately. The budget was tight this year, folks. Inflation, am I right? The price of eggs. Sorry. Where's my trombone? There you go. There's my bad egg joke. Chadia definitely recommends The Pale View of Hills, which makes me very good. Or Severed Echoes. I'm sorry. We're on Severed Echoes. Yes. Wise Blood was the book that I was thinking of from Flannery O'Connor. Thank you, chat. You guys always have my back, and I very much appreciate that. Oh, no, I pronounced Appalachia correctly. Well, thank you, Alan. I appreciate it. If the people that matter know that I'm saying it right, right? So let's move in from Surprise of the Year to one of the big ones, and that is Fiction Book of the Year. This was the most highly contested category easily. Like I said, I'm reading a lot more general fiction and basically anything that wasn't science fiction and fantasy, arguably, I put over here into the Fiction Book of the Year category. I think there were 15 books that I had to battle back and forth between, and I settled on these 4, and I still feel a little bit weird about it. I did slide Beartown in there because Mrs. Nuts read Beartown, and man, we had a blast talking about Beartown. Obviously, my friend Alan from the Library of Alexandria also loved Beartown. He was frustrated. He was frustrated with the characters, and so was I. But that was actually part of the thing of the book, I think, that made it readable, is that I wanted to see what happened next to these characters, even if I detested them at times. A lot of very complex situations and darkness in that book. And also, it's a popular book. A lot of people have opinions on it. I thought it was a lot of fun to read and a lot of fun to talk about. The Book Thief by Mark Zuzak. I don't know if I'm mispronouncing that. I apologize if I am. But The Book Thief probably should have been in the surprise category if I had not found out before I opened it that it was like literally one of the most popular, maybe I think the most rated historical fiction book on Goodreads, like millions of reviews. I didn't know this. I had no idea what this book was. I think it won the Patreon pick, and it would have been a surprise. And people were like, "You never heard of The Book Thief?" I'm like, "No." Like, go look it up. And I looked it up. I was like, "Oh, like it's okay." Okay, it's super popular. It is narrated by Death, and it inspects a little street neighborhood kind of deal in Germany, World War II. And humans scare death. That's probably the best way of wrapping up that, wrapping it up in a bow and describing it. And it is, like anything World War II, it's obviously super, super sad, but I think it makes a lot of like powerful statements about humanity and what happens when that degrades, and also people who are caught in the middle. Whew, it is intense. It is intense. And I don't know. I think it's an important book. I think two of the books on this list are important books. I think My Dark Vanessa and Book Thief. I saved that label for about 5 books, I think, in my life. One of them was Kindred last year. 2 of them are here, Book Thief and My Dark Vanessa. Then we also have The Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro. This is a book about an English butler who decides to take a couple days off, hit the countryside, see what's on the up and up, but it's also about the decaying profession and idea of an English proper butler post-World War II, where, we're accelerating into a more global economy, global world. Classes are shifting, ruling classes are being toppled. I mean, there's a lot of changes happening, and one of the casualties of that is the proper English butler. And what does that mean for someone who has dedicated their entire life to their craft? Who knows? But this book aims to find out, and I thought that it was tremendous. My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. A book about abuse, grooming, teacher and a student. Many people say that it's this generation's like Lolita type book, and it is one that I had to take many breaks from because it angered me so much. But I also thought that it was a very important book because it took a look at the trauma that comes with those kind of situations, but also the messiness of it all. And I don't mean in a dramatic way. I mean in a way where, like, the person who is the victim can come across at times confused or making the wrong decisions. But like the impacts that it has is not just in those moments of abuse, but actually decades beyond it. And I think it rang pretty true. And I thought it was a very, very important book. And I again, this is one I recommend, but my goodness, is it grim and is it dark? But I do think there's something to be obtained from it that we can walk away with. Maybe just a better understanding of people who go through some terrible things. It's a enraging book. One of the more emotional reads that I've had. Not just sadness, but being very mad, very, very mad. So this is 4 of many, many great reads that I had this year, and I bounce back and forth. I don't know. I'm just going to say the winner of the best fiction book of the year for 2024 is The Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro. Yep, he is. He's sweeping, folks. He's sweeping. Get out your brooms. To no one's surprise. I mean, I did say he's become probably my second favorite author of all time. Maybe one day he'll end up being one. I doubt it, but maybe. This book, being about a butler, has no. It reminds me a lot of Stoner by John Williams, which I've talked about at length and I've recommended to a lot of people. But I think Remains of the Day is a book, for all intents and purposes, that is going to bore 99% of people who pick this up. And I think that there are people who are going to think that I'm a boring person for enjoying it. But one of the things I heard about this book that really resonated with me, and it's something I've been thinking a lot about lately, is the idea that to live in society and to live underneath power structures, we abandon our choices of what to do and what is right at times. And what I mean by that is we trust the people that are in charge, or the people that hold the reins of these structures, to make decisions that will reflect well on us as a whole. And we surrender that by being a part of society, being a part of a country or a nation or whatever. And in that way, we are all English butlers. And this is something that Ishiguro said in an interview that really blew me away, because you might find it very hard to relate to an English butler who is being left behind by the world. But many of us do surrender that decision of what's right and what we're being represented. Because the English butler in this book has given up his allegiance and he's serving a master that he hopes is seen as a positive, that he's proud to serve. But what happens whenever the person that we have entrusted with that power makes immoral decisions or is looked at poorly in history? How does that reflect on us? What does that say about the lives that we lived, that we dedicated this time in this life to? What does that look like for us at the end of the road? But also, I think it's a very cautionary tale that there is something empowering about taking on a job or a role or a skill or passion and making it our personality, making it everything to us, our purpose. But what happens when it's over? And this relates to me because I was a professional wrestler and I dedicated my entire existence to that craft. And then one day it was over and it chewed up and spit me out. And I looked back on a lot of the things that I regretted was in light of the fact that I was sacrificing so much to do this craft. Now, I'm not saying that no one should ever sacrifice or it's not going to be hard. You're not going to make bad decisions. I'm not saying that, but it is something to think about, right? Of the connections missed, of the opportunities to help someone out, to be a good person, to be a good friend, to be a good lover, because you have decided that this is what encompasses your existence. And I think Stoner, in many ways, by John Williams, can be compared to this book. And I think it's a lesser book than Remains of the Day because John Williams is making the argument in the book that being dedicated to a job and like basically engulfing your life with a job, but being a bad husband, being a bad friend, whatever it might be, it's the cost. And maybe you might have failed in those things, but at least you were good at your job. You can take pride in your job. I'm not saying you can't take pride in your job. Don't get me twisted. But I think Remains of the Day is a more cautionary tale of that. I think he would be at odds with a book like Stoner, if I had to guess. And this book also has no right to be as funny as it is, if it tickles your humor. It does for me. Downton Abbey is something I've not experienced, but I've heard many, 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 many people say, if you like Downton Abbey, you have to read Remains of the Day. My buddy Alan from the Library of Alexandria, I mentioned I feel like every single nominee. This is one of the very few books I've ever recommended to him, and it was a home run, and he agreed with the Downton Abbey part. So, hey, let that be a recommendation, I guess, or an endorsement for this book if you like Downton Abbey. But Remains of the Day just really made me reflect on where I spend my time, how I spend my time. What do I see myself as? What do other people see me as? What's important to me? What do I think about when people think about like the way I spent my life and my time? Like, did I do enough? Did I do it properly? How much agency do I have in the morality of what I live? Have I given up too much of that power to somebody else? Maybe. Something I think about a lot. And Remains of the Day does a beautiful job of illustrating that and inspecting that. And I think that you could probably walk away with a few different answers, which is, in my opinion, a mark of a great book. But Ishiguro is saying just as much on the page as he's saying off the page. And for me, this was the fiction book of the year in a very, very tightly contested contest. Sorry, I had to get a drink. I'm not feeling especially well today. Andre said, Alan, did you end up liking this? I can answer. He did. Me and him laughed very hard at a certain tiger scene. That was great. Amanda says, heading to the bookstore after this, a stock up on Ishiguro. I hope you like him as much as I have. I really do. He just has become, I don't know, one of those authors that speak to me. Eerie Fairy Tales, who did not enjoy Remains of the Day as much, said, I kept waiting for something to happen in Remains of the Day, then the book ended. Yeah, I can see a lot of people feeling this way. If you're a plot-driven reader, I don't think this would be the one. Also, there is a movie. StoryTube's talking about the movie, and people do love the movie with Sir Anthony Hopkins, I believe. Evie said, I just realized it's Jimmy's face on the award. Yes, that's right. The trophy is kind of haunting. I love it. Thank you. Catherine said, I read Stoner this year. I still think about it. Being from Missouri, I was able to appreciate it. It was from my area. Yeah, I'm not from Missouri, but I had a lot of connections to Stoner's early parts as far as just like how he felt. And I thought Stoner was a pretty amazing book. And if you enjoyed Stoner, I would recommend The Remains of the Day to you as a counter argument to it in many ways. Joanna is here. Hello, Joanna. Said, I hate to build my expectations super high, but The Remains of the Day will probably be my book of the year next year. I hope so. And if you don't like it, just don't tell me, okay? Gavin says, Downton Abbey is my seventh. It's my seventh personality. Please read this, Gavin. I beg you. Some people are talking about here that they're going to be reading Stoner. That makes me very excited. Tanner says, Jimmy out here dispensing existential crises. Is crisis or crises? I don't know. Either way, I'm always here. Almost 200 viewers. Oh my God, we do have a lot of viewers. This new software that I use is not as obvious with the views, so sometimes I don't know. But yeah, hey, thanks for tuning in if you're here. And if you're watching after the fact, I also appreciate you very much. Oh, Bishandel says, Stoner takes place in Missouri, Southwest Missouri, native here. I guess I need to pick it up. I would highly recommend it. Meowcat says, I love a side existential crisis with my books. Hey, me too. K Fox, I'm proud of your hydration skills, Jimmy. Well, thank you. I am kind of riding a wave right now of caffeine and making it through here. I actually had considered rescheduling, but we don't do that. We try to stick to it when we can. Shot said the tiger scene was great and people are enjoying the show, which is really awesome. Tyson said, I love Stoner, but Remains just didn't do it for me. Yeah, I don't think that this is a one-for-one. Like, I don't think if you like Stoner that you're necessarily, because it is a totally different book tonally and also in its style. But I think the conversation between the two books is pretty congruent and very interesting. And I think they're taking opposite sides of the stance. But this is, again, one of those books, and there's going to be another here tonight that, you know, I don't expect everyone to enjoy it, you know, and that's cool. That's fine. Eerie Fairytale says, I like character-driven stories too. I just think this one just didn't do it for me at the time. Yeah, it's fine. It also has that English tone that some people just do not like. I'm not saying that's your assessment, but I know that bounces off. Kev says, you're going to be on COD after this. Surely sickness won't keep you down. I don't know. We'll have to see. We will have to see. So a lot of positivity coming about that. I hope that I can relate to you how much I love this book and how important it was to me. I think it's one of the few books that I would say was like perfect for me. For me being the key part of that phrase, not perfect. But I want to go into some negativity because who doesn't love a good old toxic pile? I don't do this all the time. I did it last year. Some people were mad at me. I think it's interesting to do these things and to give a preface to this award, which is Disappointment of the Year. What I want to say is just because a book is included in Disappointment of the Year, it does not mean that I hated the book or even necessarily disliked it all that much, though there is a book on here I did dislike. Disappointment of the Year is more about that word, disappointment. A book that I had really high hopes for or really wanted to love and then ended up not. This one, there was only 4 candidates. I did not have a big line of disappointments, thankfully. A lot of books met expectations or exceeded them. And that's a good thing. You know, I think I read about 63 books this year. And for only 4 of them to feel like big disappointments is pretty great. And I don't even know if necessarily I'd call like them big disappointments, but you know, just let down, whether it's expectations, the ending, whatever it might be. So we'll kind of go through these here. And remember, if I found it disappointing, it doesn't mean that I'm saying it invalidates anyone who loved these books. I'm not trying to say that at all. These are just books that happen to disappoint me. So we have Shadows of Self by Brandon Sanderson, the Mistborn Era 2 book. We have A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. You know, obviously one of the most famous books on the internet at this point. We Are the Dead by Mike Shackle and Trials of Empire by Richard Swan. So I can tell you this right now. We Are the Dead is a good book. I was honestly expecting it to be like the next hype train for me. I was really excited for like a more underrepresented series. It gets a lot of coverage on BookTube, but it's not a very popular series if you go and check out the ratings amount. So I was actually pumped about this. I was very excited. But it just didn't get there in the end. And I only had one character I really loved. So for that, I was disappointed, but I didn't hate the book at all. Trials of Empire, Richard Swan, I thought it was good. I thought it was solid. But I think in general, this trilogy just ended up not quite going the places that I wanted it to go. I also thought the romance in book 3 was kind of trash. Didn't really love it or believe in it. And for that, I finished the series and I said, man, you know, there's a lot of trilogies out there I would have liked to have read. And maybe, possibly, The Empire of the Wolf, I think is what it's called, the whole trilogy. I said, you know what, maybe I could have waited on this one, even though I really liked book 1 and 2. Book 3 just never really got there for me, but I didn't hate that book either. A Little Life. I have settled on the fact that this book has beautiful writing, some really great character moments, but overall, I think the messaging and the intention or lack of thereof and everything else makes this book not just disappointing, but one that I don't like very much at all. And then we have Shadows of Self by Brandon Sanderson, Mistborn Era 2. Sanderson's an up and down roller coaster for me. But the winner for this one, biggest disappointment of 2024 is Shadow Self by Brandon Sanderson, which is why I didn't want to talk too much about it, because now I have to go on and on and on about Mistborn Era 2. But actually, this is quite simple. I am not someone who relishes in disliking a Brandon Sanderson book. I have loved some Brandon Sanderson books in my time. I have hated some Brandon Sanderson books in my time, possibly. But the consistency is, I always want to like Brandon Sanderson's book because the guy writes so much. He writes so much. What if he was my favorite author? That would be the sickest thing in the world, right? I would have so many books. So every time I go into a Sanderson book, I'm like, God, I hope I love it, because there's more. There's more to go. And Mistborn Era 1 was a mixed bag with me. The book 1, it has its flaws. There's some stuff I found to be kind of about it. But I did like the plot of book 1 quite a bit. I really liked the end of book 1. And then obviously everyone knows I didn't like Well of Ascension, though I did come to appreciate the Siege after talking to the library from Alexandria. I'm mentioning him every single time, I guess. And then I didn't really care for book 3 at all. But Mistborn Era 2, thought it was a kind of an interesting time shift. Book 1 was really bad, but a lot of people said you got to get past book 1 because it was never intended to be a novel. It was like this workshop piece that turned into a novel. And then Shadows itself is when the real series starts. And I started it, and it's the same thing. Every time I dislike a Sanderson book, I'm always just sad about it, and I'm disappointed. and I'm disappointed right now in it because Mistborn Era 3 is going to be worked on in the next 6 years. And I don't know how much I really care. I don't know how much I'm pumped up about it. Well, I read it probably, maybe. I don't know. I haven't read Lost Metal yet. I did think Bands of Mourning, which is the third book, I thought it was better than Shadows of Self. But Shadows of Self, for me, was just like, I read it and I was like, okay, I don't like this. So Mistborn Era 2 is probably a big miss for me. Great. That sucks. So yeah, it's just the same thing every time I go into a Sanderson book. And that's why the keyword being disappointment, I'm just disappointed because I wanted to like this thing. And I still believe that Mistborn has some really interesting lore, world building, and magic. And I think Sanderson's a creative guy. And the time period was actually kind of cold, a little bit of a Western vibe. Like I like Westerns, and yeah. So, but to be fair, I dislike A Little Life far more. But this isn't the dislike of the year; it's the disappointment of the year. So for me, I thought that there would probably be a better chance of me enjoying Era 2 based on everything that people were telling me, but unfortunately it didn't happen. But I certainly dislike A Little Life more. I think We Are the Dead and Trials of Empire probably shouldn't even be on this list, but I had to come up with 4 of them. And I was disappointed by those books a little bit. So hopefully, wait, Jimmy finished a trilogy? I thought he only read book 1. Hey, Capricious Fox, you're not wrong, but hey. StoryTube said, it'll be my disappointment of the year if it's not A Little Life. Well, I hate to disappoint you. I feel bad. Andre says Shadow Stuff was okay. Books 3 and 4 are amazing. Yeah, I read Bands of the Morning, and I liked it a little bit more, but I didn't enjoy it. Kev does not like A Little Life, which is fair. Tanner says, yes, Era 2 is forgettable. Bad jokes, bland characters besides Steris. Interesting. Andre said, I take that back what I said before. Everybody hit that dislike button right now. I don't dislike you. I'm just disappointed. That should have been the award title, but I'm not as clever as you guys, unfortunately. Tanner wants to know if I knew that Wayne wears a hat. Did you? I did. I did, in fact, which is really cool. Lauren says guns plus metal magic works so well for me, and I usually don't care about guns. I was very excited about it. I mean, if I could say one thing about Alloy of Law, which I thought was not very good, I did think that the ideas that he was introducing with the magic was actually pretty neat. Tom says Lost Metal is my least favorite of Era 2. Yeah, I will probably read it just because it's the last book I have to go. And I know that there's sometimes other stuff I actually care about. So who knows, maybe. Should we do the big one? Should we do the science fiction fantasy book of the year? The final award of the night. So for those of you who joke with me and tell me that I don't read fantasy anymore, I did the math. Over 70%. Still, it was at the halfway point of the year, and still to today, 70% of my reads are fantasy. Not sci-fi, fantasy. So, and I did read a lot more sci-fi, and I'm going to read a lot more sci-fi in this coming year as well. So this is still the Fantasy Network, people. This is still the Fantasy Network, and we have some great nominees and maybe one controversial one as well, but I'm going to I'm going to address that in just a second. So the nominees for science fiction and fantasy book of the year are The Citadel, The Sword of the Lictor. Sorry, Sword of the Lictor, Book 3 and Book of the New Sun. I can barely see it. Those books were pretty much tied for me. It could have been either one. I didn't want to put all of the Book of the New Sun on here, so I just picked the third book because the ending was bananas, and I loved it. Black Leopard, Red Wolf by Marlon James. Super duper polarizing, but I like the style. I like where it went. I think that it did drag its belly a little bit towards the end, but overall, Marlon James was doing something that I had not seen before, and that is so rare in fantasy, especially from a modern release and someone who puts a lot of thought behind their style and their prose and the way that they're telling the story. And of course, my favorite, the unreliable narrator. Then we have Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell, and some people are probably going to think that Cloud Atlas shouldn't count as science fiction and fantasy, but I would disagree, especially if you listen to David Mitchell and the way he talks about his works and some of the forwards that he's written from other science fiction writers. There's almost no way to not put Cloud Atlas in science fiction and fantasy for myself, because there's so many sci-fi elements. I mean, there's all different types of stories. There's a thriller in there. There's almost like a classic in there that's very strange, but there's also a complete sci-fi story in there, post-apocalyptic. There's a lot in Cloud Atlas, and it's a lot of different things mixed into one. But what I can say is that it's excellent for me, with the big asterisk that, again, most people don't end up loving Cloud Atlas. I loved Cloud Atlas. And at the end of the day, if you do disagree that it shouldn't be here in the science fiction fantasy, suck it. It doesn't matter. It's my awards. You can make your own. Tad Williams, The Navigator's Children, one of the best fantasy series conclusions that I have ever read, from a guy who has mastered the craft and a person who writes with confidence and precision that I find to be astounding. I've kind of already ranted about this book many times. It's been all over the awards, no surprise. It's so nice when a book that you've hyped up in your mind and is the finishing to one of your favorite series actually delivers. Amazing. Amazing stuff from a guy who's been doing it for so long. All of these books are pretty tremendous. There were a couple other books that definitely could have made this list. I struggled putting Black Leopard, Red Wolf on here, not because it's not excellent, but because there was a portion of the book where I felt like I kind of lost me a little bit. But overall, it's just such a standout for what it does. But all these books, even the ones that aren't here, could easily be ones that I would recommend to people. But there can only be one, as I've said prior. And I think for anyone who knows me and has listened to the words that I've said this year, I think you know what the winner is. So the science fiction and fantasy book of the year goes to Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell. Famous movie that apparently is also very strange and doesn't work for a lot of people. But first and foremost, a wonderful book that I found to be intoxicating and addicting. I was reading it while in lines in Orlando at an amusement park. I had planned on just reading it at night on the trip. I ended up sitting in long lines, and I was like, you know what? I have to pull out the Kindle app and pick up the ebook and just start reading it now. And the thing about this book is it's many different types of stories, different types of narratives, all meshed into one in a very thin line through the book where it's barely a novel. Some people say, well, it's a collection of short stories, but there's just a tiny through line that makes this thing work, and it's a miracle in many ways. I think that this book is a struggle at points. I've famously said the first 40 pages were some of the least favorite 40 pages I've ever read in my life. And I had almost DNF'd after just loving the Bone Clocks last year at Anne Slade House. I mean, I love those books. And 40 pages in, it took me 2 weeks to read 40 pages. And then people have said, just trust it. Just trust the process. Just trust it. Okay, fine. It's David Mitchell. He had earned just enough goodwill for me not to DNF. And then I went on to find what is a top 3 book of all time for me. Maybe number 2. I mean, it's close. I mean, this is without a doubt, a top 3, top 5 book for me of all time. David Mitchell's a top 5 author. I think he's one of the best character writers. His range for voices and different styles is incredible. He is putting on almost like an Olympics of writing in Cloud Atlas, but in his other books, he shines just as well. If this is the first time you've ever heard of Dave Mitchell, you've been really wanting to get into him, I think personally that you should probably just start with Bone Clocks. I think Cloud Atlas is so different and so challenging that maybe you need to build up some of that goodwill. There is flashes of what he did in Bone Clocks here as well, But this one is definitely, to me, so far, what I've read from him, his most challenging book. But for me, really, really rewarding because of the variance of the stories. You know, you might find yourself saying this book's a 10 out of 10 at one section, and then you get to Sluicious Crossing in the middle, which is post-apocalyptic, with a whole new like vernacular and vocabulary and way of speaking. Like literally, like you almost can't understand everything they're saying. You have to read very, very slowly. And that book becomes a 1 out of 10 for some people. I know them. Like I know people say, dude, that book was my book of the year until I got to that middle part. Some people are like me. They're like, man, I read that first section and I said, what is this trash? You know, so I'm not expecting all of you who watch this, you know, the couple hundred that are watching it right now, or the thousands that'll watch after. I'm not expecting you to go out and read Cloud Atlas and all of you love it. But for those who does work, I think that you'll be able to come back and tell me and really relish in the experience of what is a miracle of a novel in many ways. So I love this book. If you're looking to try David Mitchell, I would not suggest starting here. I would suggest starting with The Bone Clocks. I think The Bone Clocks is really cool. It has the vignette style, time jumps, and everything else. But David Mitchell addresses things like climate disaster, language, love, death, everything, afterlife, robotics. I mean, he really does it all. So in many ways, I just think that this book is tremendous. And I think as soon as I finished it, I knew it was going to be my book of the year. And I think probably takes the cake for book of the year for me this year. I thought it was just tremendous. And I do count it as science fiction fantasy because of the elements. And I think if you read it, maybe you will too, unless if you're pretentious. Who knows? But it's my award, so I get to do what I want. Hello, Charmeezy. Great to see you. So the big one, the big award goes to Cloud Atlas. And this joins the likes of The Great Ordeal by R. Scott Baker, The Scar by China Mieville, Assassin's Fate by Robin Hobb. You know, this is one of my favorite books of all time. And out of all of the books that have won science fiction fantasy book of the year, this may be my favorite. So I hope that relays how much I really love this book. And hopefully we're working on some maybe some memorials for awards past that will maybe be showing up here in the background, which could be really cool. So the tradition continues of me picking a book that most people probably won't like. I mean, The Great Ordeal was like book 7 in a series that was like unedited and has like 2,000 reviews. Assassin's Fate's book 16 of a series, probably more popular than the other ones I chose. And then The Scar by China Mieville, which I think 5 people have read, and they all watch this channel. So I had to keep the gag going and pick a book that 90% of people are going to never read or hate. So, hey, you never know. You never know what I'm going to end up picking. So Aslan says, I bet your percentage of fantasy is higher if you count by page count. Without a doubt. Without a doubt. Matt says, I wish I loved Cloud Atlas as much as everyone. Well, by everyone, you mean like the whole 10 of us. Kev had said, genuinely not sure which one is going to win, but I think maybe Cloud Atlas. It was a tight year. Very, very tight year. Sammy's Pack says, thank you, Jimmy, for Dungeon Crawler Crawl. I got my cousin to read it too, having fun with him. I just got my best friend, Andrew, to start reading it, and I'm very excited to see what he thinks about it. It's a very fun book. Molly agrees that Cloud Atlas is very much sci-fi. Very cool. Evie had thought Navigator's Children was going to win. I guess I had to surprise you. So Belltube says, I'm probably 25 years away from getting Timothy Cavendish. I hope so. God, I hope so. And honestly, I hope someone films it too. That makes me happy. There are actually some people here that are really excited about Cloud Atlas. Matt says the movie is nowhere near as good. Molly says the movie is incredible. Masterpiece of editing. And I still have not watched it because I'm terrible at watching movies. I need to watch it and Remains of the Day. The Nuttys, finally. Welcome, Matt. Good to see you, my friend. Shot is disappointed in me because Navigator's Children didn't win. Well, you can join most people in my life by being disappointed with me. Dylan's Book Nook says, it's been years since I read Cloud Atlas, and it remains one of the best books I've ever read. That makes me very happy. Kev says, the glazing is insane right now. Yes, my friend David Mitchell, very big fan of the channel, watches all the time. Cloud Atlas is an insanely impressive book. I agree. Kev said, he ain't going to shag you, mate. You don't know that. Tanner said, one of my favorite books ever. Makes me happy. Penny says, wow, Tad's Award was stolen. I'm shocked. He'll never come back on for an interview ever again. Dang. Molly says Sluicious Crossing is the part that filters out the cowards. That is so amazing. Andre said, I need to read this. I read it in 2013 and went in one eye and right out the other. I think that that's fair. Yeah. I think that that's totally fair. Though I do have some people backing me up that it's science fiction fantasy, which makes me happy. Shot said, the way Jimmy described it makes me feel like I won't like it. Actually, I take that as a compliment because I don't want everyone to read it. I hope that I can somewhat relay the strengths of the book and whether or not that would work for people. You know, people who want a good through line, very coherent, like step one, step, like I just don't think it works like that. You have to be willing to kind of go in ebbs and flows. And, you know, you first half of the book is all the stories and then you reverse them. So the first story is also the last story. All the stories are split in half besides the middle section. And it's very experimental, very cool. Lost in Discovery says, another glorious Nuttys made. Thank you, brother. Hope you had a good Christmas. Other people are also recommending Ghost Written or Bone Clocks as your verse, David Mitchell, and I have heard that as well. Cooper, fact-checking me, I appreciate it, bro, said, I just looked, The Great Ordeal indeed barely has over 2,000 ratings on Goodreads. Yeah, and I don't think many people like it, to be honest with you, but I thought it was just incredible. Thought it was very unique and, you know, one of the more important, maybe not important, impactful books that I had read, so... Oh, no. Kevin said, okay, just order Cloud Atlas. You win, Jimbo. Oh, no. Amanda said, I did fall victim to the first 50-page Wild Short again. Hey, listen, if any of you read this book and you hate it, literally, I get it. Like, no qualms. Totally understand. Especially so for a lot of people, Sluicious Crossing, which is the middle section of the book where, like, it's not split, like, you just read it. A lot of people say that's the hardest part. I thought the first 50 pages were the hardest by far. The Adam Ewing stuff is just like very dry to me. But what came after was really, really great, to the point where when I got to the end of it and I revisit Adam Ewing, I was like, oh, this is actually amazing. So changed as I went for sure. Tom says, I think I would have a bad time. Cloud Atlas is going to read it anyway. Tom, I do not think you will appreciate Cloud Atlas. You might enjoy Bone Clocks though. People are saying Kev will DNF. Who knows? Who knows? It does have a weird structure. Very, very weird structure. Matt says, really helps if you like weird structure. I would agree. If you're willing to kind of go and, you know, if you're willing to kind of go along for the ride, I think that it can be pretty amazing. So that is the Nuttys. The Nuttys were hard to pick this year. It was a lot of fun. Doing this live was a new challenge for me, and I couldn't have done it without Mrs. Nuts. She literally is so important to this channel. You guys have literally no idea that she keeps the lights on. So big shout out to her and big shout out to the community for recommending so many books to me. Like a lot of these books mentioned, nominated, were from patron picks or comments or DMs that I received. And I'm always listening. You know, I am always willing to hear someone out if they're willing to put forth a good recommendation for me. So I kind of want to go through it. So the new author to me of the year was Tana French. The best series of the year was Last King of Ostnar by our good friend Tad Williams. We also had our short fiction of the year. If I can find the slide, there it is. Shortie of the year was A Pale View by Kazuo Ishiguro. The surprise of the year was good friend of the channel, Anya Dillon, with Severed Echoes. Definitely go check that out on Amazon. And then we had Best Fiction nominees, which this one was very, very tight, but the winner ended up being Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro. The disappointment of the year goes to Big Bad Brando Sando. How will he ever recover until I wet the bed in the Elantra Suite? In the science fiction fantasy book of the year, tough competition, but we end up sitting here and saying Cloud Atlas, for all its weirdness, actually was the most impactful one and the one that stuck with me and will forever probably be one of my favorite books of all time. I think that this is just the beginning of us finding a lot of new stuff. I know that I cover a lot of different things and there are plenty of people who want to see one thing, but my hope is that someone called the Fantasy Network who loves fantasy dearly can open up, you know, maybe your lanes a little bit and you can start reading other stuff from other different people, different walks of life, different genre, whatever it is, you know, because I think the more we understand about each other and different things, probably the better off we're going to be. And we need more than ever to be willing to hear out other people in their experiences. And I think that that can happen through a plethora of genres. And that is the mission here, is just to read and to have fun and to know one another. Benjamin says, tremendous, with 15 Australian super chat. Thank you, Ben. Very kind of you. You did not need to do that. But I do genuinely appreciate that. Matt actually has a really cool thing to say here. He says, or just approach it as a handful of short stories that will surprise you when they're proven to be connected. So that's the thing about Cloud Atlas is like, if there's a piece of it that you like and you don't want to finish the rest of the book, you technically just read the 2 parts of the one story that you like, which is kind of interesting. Like you could, in theory, just read those, right? Like that's absolutely acceptable way of doing it. And someone asked how many pages. I think it's like 400 or 500 pages. I think it's not terribly, but so I'm just really happy to be here. I know that many of you could do many different things on like a Friday night or whenever you're watching this, and for you to join me for another year is pretty amazing. And I genuinely do appreciate it. Lost Discovery said, requesting a best Stormlight-centric podcast of the year for the 2025 Nuttys. It's Lost and Roshar, and it's not close. Not even close. If the only... Never mind. I'll get in trouble. It's all good. Oh, God, that Jimmy Face Award. Hey, you all should definitely appreciate the fact that Andrew made that graphic last year and I reused it. Okay. Brandon Sanderson went real quick since the Nuttys premiered too, just saying, hey, you know, maybe he's watching. I don't think he'd be a fan. StoryTube said, you're a tremendous human being, Jimothy, and the way you speak about books is insightful, eloquent, and purposeful, which is frankly quite surprising. Much love, great Nuttys. Hey, from your favorite thick-headed Yankee, I appreciate you over at StoryTube, and I appreciate it. If I wasn't on my sharpest or best behavior tonight, I would like to blame the fact that I don't feel amazing. But hey, it's all right. It's all right. I love how many people are just now noticing my face is on top of the award. It's amazing. Amanda says, thank you, Jimmy and Kelsey, for your tireless work, keeping us entertained and keeping literacy going in these dark times. Yeah, we just got to keep reading, you know, and I appreciate it so much. I pity Sando now that Jimmy's tanked his Mistborn sales. Yes, he'll never, ever recover. So I guess I'll give a bit of an update, and maybe I will still do a video depending on how many people watch this. This is probably going to get out to more people than just the usual audience. But I wanted to say that 2025 is going to come with some changes. I don't think they're bad changes necessarily, but I've been really trying to think of like what this thing could be, what it can become, what else can I change and make this more entertaining, more worth your time. I'm asking for a lot of people's time whenever they're tuning in for 3 hours or an hour and a half or whatever for a live stream. And one of the things that I've been thinking about is the fact that I have Chatting with Nuts, where I bring people on and we have great conversation. And then I have my In a Nutshells, which are basically just book wrap-ups. But I've been thinking that maybe the book wrap-ups need to become part of Chatting with Nuts. And what I mean by that is that every 2 weeks, on a Friday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time, your favorite time and place, same as mine, that maybe instead of saving all the books for the end of the month, that every 2 weeks I cover the books that I have read in same fashion with the templates and the points and the recommendations and the nut button. And that way, if you are someone who comes to this only for the book stuff and you don't necessarily care about the conversation, that every time you tune in, anytime I go live, you'll have something to tune into. There are some other changes that I'm not willing to talk about right now because, quite frankly, I don't want anyone else to do them. So I will keep those other things very close to my chest, but that's just something I've been kicking around. I've also kicked around the idea of 2025 being the last year of doing this. I've absolutely kicked around that idea. Sometimes I do wonder if I'm needed, I guess, no one needs anything, I guess, but what am I doing here kind of thing. And it seems that people do enjoy what I do and people enjoy showing up and there's a community and that means a lot to me. So I don't think 2025 is going to be my last year, but I had kicked around that idea at some point. I mean, doing something for 5 years feels like a pretty like monumental achievement. Especially something that can be as demanding as this. Not that demanding as in like, oh, this is so hard or anything, but it's a lot. It's a lot of thought, and I care a lot about it, so I stress out about it quite a bit. But for right now, I feel like I'm kind of doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and right now, even on this live, I feel like this is what I should be using my time for. And the people that I care about are all here. And it's also wonderful that Mrs. Nuts has been more involved. You know, I like spending time with my wife. I like spending time with Mrs. Nuts. And for her to be more involved is something great. So, you know, she's already been in more live streams, but she's going to be in even more than this. And she is going to have a voice here on the channel because she's reading so much and has so many brilliant things to say and is different perspective outside of what can be an echo chamber sometimes online. And I don't mean that to be demoralizing to the community. I just mean that it happens. It happens, right? So stick along for the ride. We're not quite dead yet. We're going into year 5. I feel like there's been a lot more buzz lately around these live streams of getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and more people are watching after the fact, which is pretty amazing. I want to do something that only I can do, and I want to be the very best at it. And I think I can do that. And it is very motivating whenever I have so many excellent people in the chat, in the comments, and the Patreon and everything. And from the bottom of my heart, it means a whole lot. We only get like so many revolutions around the sun, right? I just had my birthday, and I always think about these things. And of course, I'm existential because I'm a stupid, fake, deep dude, bro. But with those revolutions around the sun, I do value the minutes and the hours that I spend. And I think that this has been one of the most worthwhile pursuits that I've ever had. And to do it for like another year, you know, going on 5 years, it's pretty cool that this thing continues to surprise me. This thing continues to entertain me, and it continues to find new ways of providing value and like worth to my life. And I've gotten to meet so many amazing people that I think that are just doing incredible things, you know, whether it's someone like Gavin, who is like literally one of the most entertaining people I've ever met in my entire life and also loving, or Tom Orange, who is strong as an ox and also, you know, smart as a scientist, or any of the other amazing guests that I've had on. It never fails to shock me how powerful this thing can be. And when I say thing, I don't necessarily even mean my channel. I just mean community online through a central point that has value. And that thing is obviously reading, and the value can be whatever you want to assign it. So I just really love you guys. And thanks for always letting me be me. Thanks for listening to me passionately rant about books that 2% of the audience is going to enjoy. I appreciate you putting up with that, and for growing with me and sticking around. I'm not as young and spry as I once was, but I think I still have a whole lot of gas left in the tank. And who knows? Maybe I'll even upload normal videos again. I'm starting to learn there's no rules to this thing. So I say I'm doing all lives, but who knows? Maybe a book review will hit your platform or your subscription feed one day, or maybe a top 10, or maybe top authors. We got a lot to do. But I do think that the future of this is all in lives, because I love streaming. It keeps me on my toes. It keeps me feeling like I got to be on, and I thrive in that realm. That's what I do best. That's what I'm the best at. And it provides me with a challenge that I desperately need in my life, so I don't grow apathetic. So live tier rankings, live top 10s, those are all a part of the thing. And you're going to see Chatting with Nuts become something much more this year, I think. I hope. I really, 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 really hope that you guys are all having a great holiday season. Whatever holiday you celebrate, doesn't really matter. And if it hasn't been good, and if you haven't had people to share and commune with and fellowship, my comment section is always open to you. And, you know, these live streams, if you can catch them, are always a great place to find some new people to talk to. So I love you guys. I love this channel. I love what I do, and I love reading the most. So, all right, that's it. See ya. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for tuning in to a very hard Nuttys. Oh God, that didn't sound good. Yeah, very hard Nuttys to pick, but a lot of really good, great winners. I hope from this video, what you gather is obviously what I enjoyed, but I hope that you don't take this as me trying to invalidate or validate your opinions. What I would like to do is add some books to your TBR and make your life stressful when you're picking your next book, because that's actually the fun of being a reader. So don't stress about your TBR. Don't stress about how many books you read. Who cares? Just read, and read well, and read deeply, and read thoroughly, and read and share your experiences, and also be open to the idea that somebody might disagree with you. because sometimes through disagreement, we can grow, we can learn, and we can become better. And I hope that everyone has a great new year. I will be back next week to wrap up December and all the books that I read. I had a rare DNF. And I also had a pretty awesome read, and I'll have all the things to say about the controversial, polarizing final release of the first arc of the Stormlight Archive, The Wind and Truth by Brandon Sanderson. So you're not going to want to miss that. I'll probably end up talking about Wind and Truth for like 30 minutes. And then, the comment section will be a bloodbath probably, but hopefully everyone's nice. So check it out next. People are saying read hard, soft nutty. It's pretty good. Read hard. That's a new shirt. I'll be putting that on my merch store here very soon. So tune in next week. I'll be wrapping up December. We'll do the Patreon pick of the month for January. And then a bunch of new things, exciting things coming for Chatting with Nuts in the year of 2025. We're gonna hit the ground running. It's gonna be sick. It's gonna be awesome, and you're gonna be here for it. You're gonna be a part of it, and we're gonna have a good time while we do it with big smiles and lots of big books. If you like this video, you can hit like. If you dislike it, you can hit dislike. If you loved it, think about subscribing. I would really like for you to be here for the next time that I go live. And if you really want to support the channel, there's a Patreon in the description. It's optional, but always appreciated. And until we see you next time, be good, be safe, and remember to always, you know the line, say it, keep turning the page.